railroad tracks that ran in between our neighborhood and the more wealthy environs. We dreamed of more, while our parents' lives centered around survival and making it from paycheck to paycheck. Instinctively, we understood that more had to be possible, even if we didn't know what to do to get there. These imaginings, these desires, are the roots of ambition. As adults, like Valerie, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our construction of who we're supposed to become. In such a world, I wouldn't dare dream of running for higher office, for mayor or governor or president. At least for now, Valerie sees herself retiring in 20 more years from Piggly Wiggly as a cashier, rather than as a small business owner who helps the community raise its children. From our brief meeting, I could see she had the fire, albeit of a low burn, of a minority leader. She had ambition, she had vision, but she didn't have the faith, and understandably so. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what we want and how to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about whether they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once outside. These men, and they are usually men and typically white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of old times and older friendships or newer alliances. The ends have already been decided. Only the means are to be discussed. Most potential minority leaders feel the same lack of faith Valerie had, at least at some point in their evolution. We may not know how to get the first job, let alone make it to the big chair. We don't know how to take the leap from accepting our fates to actually changing them, and not just a little, but radically. Then there are those who simply don't know what they want. The drive to achieve burns inside, often without a clear target. We want to be something, but what that is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, top of the morning to you. Happy Monday. It is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Today is the day 80 years ago that Auschwitz, the largest of the death camps that the Nazis put into place to murder the people that Hitler said were foreigners within their own country. Let that sink in for a minute. This was one of his favorite phrases. Foreigners within Germany, Jews, to slaughter them. We got a lot to talk about today. The Democrats' fatal flaw, the party that forgot how to captivate America. Charles Koch's network launches a $20 million campaign to back the Trump tax breaks. And Dear Maga, was it worth it? In the second hour of our program, is Trump going to clean out Gaza for beachfront property? Border czar Homan says elementary schools and children could be targets. And the Inspector General fired by Donald Trump has a warning for Americans. We'll get into that in the second hour of the program. In the third hour of our program, it's a death sentence. The U.S. health insurance industry is failing us. It's killing us, actually. Also, is Trump getting rid of IRS agents to help out his billionaire buddies? And that's a hard no. Outrage across Germany as Elon Musk tells the far-right Germans, the arguably neo-Nazi party AfD, to get over the past guilt, right? We'll talk about that in the third hour on this Holocaust Remembrance Day. But my opening here, my daily take over at HartmannReport.com is titled Democrats' Fatal Flaw, the party that forgot how to captivate America. And this is a big deal, right? Day before yesterday, Saturday, Donald Trump did a rally in Las Vegas. He was doing his no tax on tips mantra, because that was the thing that probably caused him to win Las Vegas. And by the time Facebook and Meta and X and TikTok and Instagram were done with the weekend, all of them now apparently having rewritten their algorithms so that they favored Republicans and Trump. I think it's safe to guess that Trump's rally probably got hundreds of millions of impressions. Meanwhile, over in the United States Senate, Chuck Schumer gave a speech condemning Trump, specifically for firing the inspectors general, the 18 inspectors general, the anti-corruption officers. We'll get into that in a little bit. But Chuck Schumer read his, or Well, let me read you this droning speech from it's printed out here, and I've got the papers in front of me on this lectern, and I'm going to look down over my glasses and tell. Yeah, right. I mean, it was so boring. I watched part of it, and I don't remember what he said because it was so boring. You know, being media savvy and exploiting the hottest new media isn't a new thing. I mean, you'd think Democrats would have figured this out. Richard Nixon was a crook. But Americans didn't know that in 1960. In 1960, they just thought he was, you know, Eisenhower's vice president. I mean, Jimmy Hoffa knew it. He bribed him, but that's a tangent. But he lost to John Kennedy in 1960, not because people knew he was a crook, but because he refused to wear makeup when he went on television to debate Kennedy and didn't play for the camera. He was not media savvy. He did not use this brand new medium. Now, people go, 1960, television was brand new? Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you know, it came out in the 40s, but by the 50s, I mean, when I was a little kid growing up, the first couple of years, well, I don't remember my first years, but I remember vaguely when we got our first television when I was around 4 or 5, and I remember clearly when we got our first color television when I was like 10. Television was a new thing in 1960. It was the tail end of the 1950s. And it had just gone, you know, everybody in America basically got one during the 1950s. And John F. Kennedy knew how to use television, and Richard Nixon didn't. And that's why Kennedy became president and Nixon didn't. Calvin Coolidge was the first president to use radio. He used it in a presidential address in 1923 when radio was just starting out. But the first really radio-savvy president was Franklin Roosevelt with his fireside chats, which started just a couple weeks after he was inaugurated with his famous, you know, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. He was talking about, don't be afraid of the Great Depression, we're going to beat this thing. And every step along the way, throughout his presidency, whenever Franklin Roosevelt did something consequential, he went to the American people through radio and told them about it, using this hot new communications medium, radio. And how did the American people respond? They re-elected him 3 times. He was elected president. Franklin Roosevelt was elected president 4 times in a row. I guarantee you, if Joe Biden had done the same thing, or if Kamala Harris had done it as his surrogate, I mean, she was vice president. If Joe Biden or Kamala Harris had done the same thing, if every time they had a consequential success legislatively, every time they saw the economy get better, every time something, you know, positive happened, and every time they beat the Republicans or the Republicans tried to do something stupid, if they had gone on social media, which is the new radio and television, roughly half of Americans now get all or much of their news from social media. If Biden or Harris had gone on social media every single time for 4 years that there was a success, right now, Donald Trump would not be sitting in the White House. It would be either Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. It's really that simple. And you know it, right? I'm not just blowing smoke here. You know that this is true. But instead, you know, Biden basically hid out for 4 years. And Kamala Harris was like the great vanishing person. Meanwhile, Trump was out there every single day on social media, churning the media. I mean, Republicans looked at Jack Kennedy and his success in 1960 and said, holy cow, we need to get a media star like that. And thus, in 1980, we got a washed-up movie actor, a B movie actor, Ronald Reagan, as president. And it worked for them. He could sell the American people anything because he'd been selling soap for GE on the GE television theater for years. They haven't been selling soap, he'd been selling GE televisions. But you get the point. We no longer live in the radio era. Radio advertising revenue is in the crapper right now. We no longer live in the television era. CNN is about to lay off 200 people. Television networks are, and stations are in distress. Radio has lost their revenue to podcasts. Television has lost their revenue to YouTube. And and the Washington Post, they're having to reinvent the newspaper because, nobody's reading it. In the 1930s, if it didn't happen on radio, it didn't happen. In the 1960s, if it didn't happen on television, it didn't happen. And today, if it doesn't happen on X or Facebook or Blue Sky or YouTube or TikTok, it didn't happen. Thomas Carlyle came up with this idea. He called it the great man theory of history back in the 1850s. He said that all these hinge points, the major hinge points of history, were turned by somebody who stepped forward and had great charisma and leadership skills. Well, we have people like that in the Democratic Party. And some of them, a few of them, a small handful of them are on social media. But the Democratic Party needs to figure this out. They need to start, aggressively recruiting and promoting people who have charisma and leadership talent, and they need to start using social media. If the Democrats don't start using political theater and fielding candidates who are talented enough to capture a social media audience, our country is doomed. It's 15 minutes past the hour. Charles Koch's network has launched a $20 million campaign to push Donald Trump's new second round of tax cuts for billionaires. Why? Well, hey, Charles is a billionaire. That might have something to do with it. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's talk media for the sane among us. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back. Michael in Gainesville, Florida. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Got a notice from the people who are putting on a play in Dayton, Tennessee for the 100th anniversary of the Scopes trial, which supposedly, along with some subsequent legislation, so that our children are under Constitution, a law, mandated to be taught the truth of evolution. And as you and I have discussed previously on this very show, it's really presented more emphasizing competition and survival of the fittest, and the cooperation part is kind of left to the wayside, so it's not at all a balanced presentation. And I'm just wondering, one thing we haven't discussed ever is, what would our economy perhaps look like were we to have if every single think tank on the planet didn't have that concept of survival of the fittest optimizes, which of course evolution does not optimize. If they didn't have that, what would the world look like? And it occurs to me that we might be looking at, something, along the lines of efficiency and natural laws do lead to kind of a golden age. Perhaps this is something for a seminar at that Scopes event. I think they are putting on some seminars, by the way, and I know you've got some actor friends. And also, historians against scholasticide, I think, would have to be because of what's going on in the world. But back to the efficiency. Efficiency, to have trust, would be something along the lines of a meme coin or a Bitcoin, and in order to be trustable, the programming would be the key. It would be optimized to deliver the most freedoms and to pursue the most happiness, which is literally our Constitution, and to optimize health and happiness by the programmers of those cryptocurrencies. And an economy where, for example, I'm looking out my window, and if the curve is too slight when you enter into the entranceway, people speed and accidents happen. If it were more severe and angled, those accidents would be lessened. In a perfect world, it'd be like when you type something and misspell it. Some
Michael,
automated AI
we've wandered
would say that
all over the
needs
place
fixing.
here in this.
Well,
in
I'm
this
saying
call.
efficiency would be universal. We could have a golden age brought on by something like Elon is picturing, and like we've all envisioned at some point.
That's
literally
nonsense.
perfection.
First of all,
I don't know.
cryptocurrency isn't actually a currency. It's a commodity that you can exchange for things, that some people will exchange for things.
Oh, no, not used to barter. I agree. It's being used just for barter, but it could also be used to track. And so that if something isn't efficient, I can go back and find where the transaction occurred and the inefficiency occurred. So and I don't want to focus on
that ain't going to happen. I mean, the principal use of
concept.
cryptocurrency right now is crime. That's the main use for it.
Right.
I mean, it's used for drug transactions. It's used for illegal guns. It's used, its principal value is crime. And Trump just pardoned the guy who started Silk Road. The largest online drug operation in the world that was entirely based on cryptocurrency. No, I get it, Michael. I get it. Thanks for the call. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So what do we call the really, really mind-bogglingly rich? At the founding of the Republic, they were referred to as speculators or moneyed interest or aristocrats. In the years leading up to the Civil War, we called them the cotton lords and the plantation aristocracy. In the late 19th century, they were the robber barons. In the 1930s, FDR called them the economic royalists. But since the Reagan Revolution, we've just called them billionaires. And now, some of them want to call themselves tech bros. Like, that's kind of a good thing, like tech is positive and bros, like Mark Zuckerberg saying we need more masculine energy in American business culture. So we need a new phrase. I would like to suggest the morbidly rich. Morbidly suggests unhealthy. And the vast riches that some of these people have is unhealthy to our democracy, particularly since 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court said that morbidly rich people can buy politicians. And it's unhealthy for them, too. So morbidly rich. There's an op-ed over at HartmannReport.com all about it. Check it out.
Once upon a time, they owned the stage. FDR's fireside chats lit the page. JFK smiled, he knew the score. His charm and vision opened the door. But the years rolled on and the game has changed. Media's a weapon, the rules rearranged. Trump's on TikTok, they're stuck in the past. Schumer's speeches, a snooze that won't last. The Democrats' fatal flaw, they don't see the writing on the wall. The battle's online where the cliques all roar, but they fight like it's still 64. Where's the spark? Where's the soul? The fire to capture the nation's goal. Trump shouts no tax on tips. The crowd's alive. Algorithms spin, his rallies thrive. Meanwhile, the left reads scripts so dry. No connection, no reason to try. They had the leaders.
23 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Americans for Prosperity is the group that was started by Charles and David Koch back in the day. And they just announced over the weekend, well, not so much announced, this was a private fundraising email that went out to people in their network. And a copy of it was obtained by The Guardian, by Ed Pilkington's writing over at The Guardian about it, that they are launching a $20 million campaign to get Trump's tax breaks through. What I thought was interesting is, $20 million doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it will go a long way online. And in fact, this is what they're going to have: digital advertising, phone calls, social media posts, podcasts, and on the ground door knocking. And to pitch a new tax break for billionaires like Charles Koch, according to Ed Pilkington in The Guardian. Charles saves about $1 billion a year from Trump's tax. It's estimated. He writes, it's estimated that the Kochs, who own the U.S.'s second largest privately held company, have benefited by more than $1 billion a year from Trump's tax cuts. And this is incredible. They want to aid Trump's bid for a return to the White House by running. Oh, they did, by the way. AFP. Americans for Prosperity, they did an intensive digital advertising campaign in the swing states, relentlessly and falsely attacking Bidenomics as the sole cause of inflation in the U.S., according to Ed Pilkington over at The Guardian. Their perspectives suggest that Trump and Charles have apparently made up. They say this is Nancy McLean, who wrote Democracy in Chains. She said Trump and Koch are now working hand in glove. Chris Wright, who is a fracking company boss, who now Trump has put in charge of the energy department, he's our energy secretary, or will be when he gets confirmed, has openly expressed support for the Kochs, also fossil fuel barons. And so, they want to borrow another $5 trillion to give to the richest people in America. Which raises the question. JoJo from Jers, This Ain't About Eggs, writing over at her Substack piece. She said, what I want to know is this: what has Donald Trump done since he returned to office that has benefited MAGA people in some tangible, measurable way? This is a question to them. She says, did pardoning or releasing the most violent January 6th insurrectionists make you feel safer in your home? Did shutting down the Office of Gun Violence Protection make your kids safer at school? What about the freeze on cancer research or halting the operations and external communications from federal agencies like the FDA and CDC? Did any protection from discrimination at work make your daughter's professional path easier? Did stopping the aid we were sending to Ukraine and Taiwan put more food on your table? Did raising prices on your prescriptions make it easier for you to manage your medical treatment? Does shutting FEMA down make you worry less because you live in a state that has hurricanes and wildfires? Do you sleep better at night knowing that ICE is raiding offices and schools? She points out eggs are now more expensive than they were a few weeks ago and in short supply because of the bird flu. And by the way, Trump has shut down the CDC and FDA's ability to even communicate to us about bird flu. MAGA people, is this making you feel safer? Or are you just happy that brown people are being pushed out of the country in record numbers and black people will no longer have any sort of benefits with regard to diversity, with hiring and things like that? That it's just going to be, basically all white people in charge again. It's the 1950s back again. And frankly, I think, to speak to Joe, that, this is what
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
MAGA doesn't care how badly they're being ripped off as long as black people and brown people are suffering. That's all they care about, in my opinion. What say you? I'll pick up your calls after. From David Blight's book, Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom. This is from the introduction. In his speech at the dedication of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., September 24, 2016, President Barack Obama delivered what he termed a, quote, clear-eyed view of a tragic and triumphant history of black Americans in the United States. He spoke of a history that is central to the larger American story, one that is both contradictory and extraordinary. He likened the African American experience to the infinite depths of Shakespeare and Scripture. The, quote, embrace of truth as best we can know it, said the president, is, quote, where real patriotism lies. Naming some of the major pivots of the country's past, Obama wrapped up his central theme in a remarkable sentence about the Civil War era. Quote, we've buttoned up our Union blues to join the fight for our freedom.
We've railed against injustice for decade upon decade, a lifetime of struggle and progress and enlightenment that we see etched in Frederick Douglass's mighty leonine gaze, end quote. How Americans react to Douglass's gaze, indeed how we gaze back at his visage, and more important, how we read him, appropriate him, or engage his legacies, informs how we use our past to determine who we are. Douglass's life and writing emerged from nearly the full scope of the 19th century, representative of the best and the worst in the American spirit. Douglass constantly probed the ironies of America's contradictions over slavery and race. Few Americans use Shakespeare and the Bible to comprehend his story and that of his people as much as Douglass. And there may be no better example of an American radical patriot than the slave who became a lyrical prophet of freedom, natural rights, and human equality. Obama channeled Douglass in his dedication speech, knowingly or not. So do many people today. Born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, a slave, in Talbot County, Maryland, in February 1818, the future Frederick Douglass was the son of Harriet Bailey, one of 5 daughters of Betsy Bailey, and with some likelihood his mother's white owner. He saw his mother for the last time in 1825, though he hardly knew her. She died the following year. Douglass lived 20 years as a slave and nearly 9 years as a fugitive slave subject to recapture. From the 1840s to his death in 1895, he attained international fame as an abolitionist, editor, orator of almost unparalleled signature, and the author of 3 autobiographies that are classics of the genre. As a public man, he began his abolitionist career 2 decades before America would divide and fight a civil war over slavery that he openly welcomed. Douglass was born in a backwater of the slave society of the South, just as steamboats appeared in bays and on American rivers, and before the telegraph, the railroad, and the rotary press changed human mobility and consciousness. He died after the emergence of electric lights, the telephone, and the invention of the phonograph. The renewed orator and traveler loved and used most of these elements of modernity and technology. Douglass was the most photographed American of the 19th century, explained in this book, and especially by the intrepid research of 3 other scholars I write upon. Although it can never really be measured, he may also have been, along with Mark Twain, the most widely traveled American public figure of his century. By the 1890s, in sheer miles and countless number of speeches, he had few rivals as a lecturer in the golden age of oratory. It is likely that more Americans heard Frederick Douglass speak than any other public figure of his time. Indeed, to see or hear Douglass became a kind of wonder of the American world. He struggled as well with the pleasures and perils of fame as much as anyone else in his century, with the possible exceptions of General Ulysses S. Grant or P.T. Barnum. Douglass's dilemma with fame was a matter of decades, not merely of moments, and fraught with racism. The orator and writer lived to see and interpret black emancipation, to work actively for women's rights long before they were achieved, to realize the civil rights triumphs and tragedies of Reconstruction, and to witness and contribute to America's economic and international expansion in the Gilded Age. He lived to the age of lynching and Jim Crow laws, when America collapsed into retreat from the real victories and revolutions in race relations that he had helped to win. He played a pivotal role in America's second founding out of the apocalypse of the Civil War, and he very much wished to see himself as a founder and defender of the Second American Republic. In one lifetime of anti-slavery, literary, and political activism, Douglass was many things, and the set of apparent paradoxes makes his story so attractive to biographers, as well as to so many constituencies today. He was a radical thinker and a proponent of classic 19th century political liberalism. At different times, he hated and loved his country. He was a ferocious critic of the United States and all its hypocrisies, but also, after emancipation, became a government bureaucrat, a diplomat, and a voice for territorial expansion. He strongly believed in self-reliance and demanded an activist interventionist government at all levels to free slaves, defeat the Confederacy, and to protect black citizens against discrimination. Douglass was a serious constitutional thinker, and few Americans have ever analyzed race with more poignancy and nuance than this mostly self-taught genius with words. He was a radical editor, writer, and activist. The book Frederick Douglass by David Blight. American cipher, Bo Bergdahl and the U.S. tragedy in Afghanistan by Farwell and Ames.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Fueled by fear, a whisper grows and it's all you hear. From every screen it feeds the fire, twisting truth to fuel desire. A mother's cry, a worker's loss, a calculated line they'll toss. They turn your pain into their gold. Selling grievance never gets old. The grievance machine, it's always on. Spinning stories dusk till dawn. Fear and lies are its gasoline. Bow to the beast, the grievance machine. They say the danger's at your door. Immigrants, schools, and the poor. They shape your fears, take your trust, turn it to anger, feed their lust. They built the engine in the dark, fueled by greed, it hit its mark. Your safety, they claim, is on the line, but it's their power they enshrine. The grievance machine, it's always on.
Welcome back, 36 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. What's on your mind today? George in Cripple Creek, Virginia. Hey, George, what's up?
Hey, Tom, did you see yesterday Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus, Europe's longest-serving dictator since 1994, was reelected, but he got 6% of the vote.
Which
so
is
to make it look legit, it looked like he ran some palooka who had no chance of winning, just to make the elections look legitimate. Any legitimate opponent who had a real chance of winning is either in prison or in exile.
right, and some reporter asked him about that. I caught this clip on the BBC last night where, a reporter actually asked him, how is this, how can you claim a credible or a legitimate victory when all your opponents are either in jail or exiled? And his response was that his opponents made their choices. So.
Yeah, I think he made their choices for him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, their choice was to, stand up to him. So how dare you, right?
Yeah, either, leave or wind up in prison. And another thing, Lukashenko has agreed to let Putin station some of his new Oreshnik, which in Russian is hazelnut, hypersonic missiles in Belarus, with, independently targetable warheads. And Putin will supply the missiles and Belarus will supply the transporters. So, that'll cut down on, he's used it a couple times against Ukraine, but that'll even cut down more on the distance the missile has to fly.
Right. Belarus is right across the northern border of Ukraine, which raises the question, when Ukraine starts striking...
That's where Putin launched his invasion in 2022.
Exactly.
So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, which raises the question, is Ukraine going to start attacking Belarus?
Yeah, that would be a significant escalation. Yeah, so far they haven't. I'm surprised, especially if they haven't moved those Oreshnik missiles to Belarus yet, but I think if they do, that would be a legitimate target.
Yeah, and then it becomes a regional war, not just
exactly right. Yeah, right next to Poland and et cetera, et cetera.
Yep, and backing up against the Baltic states too, as I recall.
Exactly right.
If the map in my head is correct. Yeah. Okay, George. Thank you for. Thank you for.
Yeah, keep up the good work. And since it's cold, I'm watching on Free Speech TV now. When it's warm, I enjoy on Sirius.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, George. It's great to hear from you.
Yeah.
Good talking to you.
Bye.
Thank you. Susan in Caldwell, Idaho. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
The elimination of news coverage in our country and around the world. You cover it a lot, but I don't know. Do your readers realize that Meta has banned Canada's news organizations from their Facebook content because Canada had the nerve to ask Meta to pay the outlets for their reporting?
Really?
It's the same situation. That law passed in 23, and Meta enforced it last fall. Yes, Canadians cannot see their news on their Facebook feed. And a few years earlier, Australia had toyed with the idea of demanding that Meta pay the Australian newspapers and other outlets. And Meta threatened them, and they backed down.
Yeah, this is all because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have enough money yet, right?
Absolutely. And while we're talking about this, Meta is now not going to renew its contracts, the current contracts for whatever they're worth, with Australian outlets, and they have German and French outlets also being, deplatformed for not what they're doing. They don't want to pay anybody or give anything. I don't know, share the ad revenue. Is that how they do it? Right. If they give them anything. But Canada, which is facing a national election, has no news on its social media.
Well, it has no news
not even covered here.
No, let's be clear about this, Susan. Canada has no news from reputable, credible news sources. What they do have is so-called
legacy.
What they do have is a plethora of right-wing websites that purport to be news or pretend to be news. I mean, you've got pink slime newspapers in Canada, just like in the United States, run by right-wing billionaires who hate Trudeau.
Yes,
that will show up on Facebook.
And you want to hear something scarier? I was listening to On the Media, a show that NPR produces, and the Pew Research Center has come out with a study last year about the elimination of information on the web. It gives statistics of just how much information is now gone from the web. For a golden era, the web was archiving or holding on to links and actual data. Well, as of 2023, 20% of all government websites that had existed in 2013, 10 years prior, are no longer there. It's worse for local government, apparently. And it's just like this, no matter what area you're looking at, news archive, any topic you might be looking for, it's just gone. I think the term they're using is digital decay.
Yeah, or digital amnesia.
It's astounding. Digital amnesia, yeah. And I don't know. I'm aware of these website services where you can archive what you're reading on your own into your own device, but I don't know if that works, if the underlying information has just completely disappeared from the whole universe of the web. I don't know if it even works after a while, but I think people should be really aware that that's what's happening here. And definitely Mr. Zuckerberg has non-pink slime media in his crosshairs.
Yep. There's elections coming, and the right-wing billionaires really are not big fans of progressives or Democrats or people who just, think that countries should work for the benefit of average working people rather than the billionaire class. Spot on. Susan, thank you. Roy, what's on your mind today?
Hello?
Hey, Roy, you're on the air. What's up?
Oh, yes. Hi, Tom. I find it coincidental that the Bergdahl story you told, I think my clandestine agent friend was part of that.
The what
and it's
story?
Because of him, for the Bo Bergdahl story you were reading about, his biography.
Oh, that was one of the book reports.
Yeah. So, he was captured and then had to be extracted.
Sure.
And so it's because of my friend that I'm listening to. He told me back in the late 90s that, Roy, remember, mass media lies to you, sometimes telling you completely the opposite of the truth. And this is before Donald Trump came down the escalator and said some similar things. But
yeah.
So I was a Reagan hero. Reagan was my hero, wrong conservative Christian fellow at the time. And so I, when he said that, when my friend said that, I laughed and I thought, well, he's dead serious. And so I went on back to listen to everything, read everything, and I came across Radio Pacifica and the late Roy of Hollywood, and he introduced me to a guy named Thom Hartmann and Amy Goodman.
Good on Roy.
And my life changed totally.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad.
So I'm just putting that out there as to how maybe we can reach some of our conservative friends. And I really, as an educator, I feel that education is going to be a key. People will make the right choice if they're properly educated.
I agree, Roy. And one of the most important things that people can do if they really want to support, however they're listening to this program, whether it's on a commercial station, whether it's on a Pacifica station, whether it's on Free Speech TV, whether it's on YouTube or any of the other social media platforms that we're on. We're also live on Substack. Is tell their friends about it. Pass it along. Get the newsletter from us. Particularly this Tom.tv, which is all about this show, and share it with your friends. Roy, thank you so much.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with more of your calls. Stay with us. And welcome back. Clyde in Aurora, Colorado. Hey, Clyde, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
I wanted to congratulate you on the Vilci segment last night.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was nice yesterday morning. It's 7 o'clock, and it was 7:45 in the morning my time. Maybe, did it replay in the evening, or did you just miss?
Yeah, I saw it. Oh, okay. And I just wanted to say, if you keep doing that, you're never going to get invited back to Fox.
Fox quit inviting me after I pretty thoroughly stunned, one of their people, politely, But I mean, they were just spinning BS, and I called it several times in a row. And they had this one host. I'm not even sure he's still on Fox any longer. He was doing a weekend show, and I'm sorry I don't recall his name. But a fairly nice guy who tried to have reasonable debates between conservatives and people like me. And he invited me on a number of times, and then finally. Because I don't think pushing their stuff past, their BS past me, that they just gave up.
You can't have rational conversations with irrational people.
That's exactly right.
But I did want to make two things real quick. About the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and how that is going to be completely blind to the public. And the fact that the Freedom of Information Act will not be able to be used in the future to even find out what they've done or how they've done it.
That's correct, because it's not an official government agency, so it's not covered by FOIA filings.
Yeah, and I really didn't understand that, but so we're not going to be able to know what they're doing or when they're doing it or how they're doing it.
During the first Trump term, he had agencies just routinely ignore Freedom of Information Act filings. This one, of course, is being set up so it's specifically not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. You're absolutely right, Clyde, and that's really a very big deal. But even the agencies that are subject to Freedom of Information Act, now that Trump thinks he can break any law, and the Supreme Court will hold him harmless. I mean, he just did this with firing 18 inspectors general. The law says you have to give 30 days notice, basically, and you have to explain your reason, and it has to be a reason that has reasonable justification. He did none of that. He just fired them overnight. And in fact, the guy who sent out the letter was the guy who was carrying Don Jr.'s bags when he went to Greenland. I mean, Trump is elevating into positions of power people that he just knows will suck up to him regardless of their qualifications. And so there you go.
If we don't wake up to the fact that they're actually going to destroy the democracy and the United States of America, what are we going to do? Wait until they bankrupt the country with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and stuff?
Yeah, I think that's coming.
I mean, it's...
I expect a major crash in the next 4 years. Billionaires love it when markets crash because it's a buying opportunity for them. So I fully expect that to happen. Clyde, thank you for the call. Spot on. 49 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls after this. Stay tuned. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So right-wing billionaires are major funders of the GOP, and the GOP has been promoting basically a death cult. You got Ron DeSantis most recently signing a law that eliminates legal liability for medical professionals who refuse to provide services to people in crisis if it violates their moral, ethical, or religious convictions. The Republican Party has picked up from the Democrats, actually, ironically, weirdly, the old Dixiecrats, the old Southern racists. They used to be Democrats prior to 1964, but then the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and all that. And Nixon came in along in '68 with the Southern strategy, and now they're all Republicans. So why are these right-wing billionaires willing to support this death cult? Is it really just about taxes and deregulation? There's a piece about it at thehartmannreport.com. Check it out.
It starts with a promise, a populist glow of how to shake the system, make the status quo go. But behind the curtain, the stage is set for a power play we won't soon forget. They charm the crowd, they seize the mic, then target the truth, then dim the light. The pillars quake, the ground runs red, a democracy hangs by a thread.
Welcome back, 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom, real quick, since it's Holocaust Memorial Day, I just want to say that, Hitler's speech on January 30th, 1939, that's when he prophesied the demise or the eradication of Jews in Europe. Mm-hmm. It's also known as the Kroll Opera Theater speech. On January 30th, 2027, that will be the 88th anniversary. And also, Trump's name used in gematria does come out to 88. It's really weird. 88, is Heil Hitler.
Yeah, I know.
But the other thing is but my main point to Javad Zarif, Fareed Zakaria, he's the vice president educated in America. He was educated in America. If you listen to his speech, it just proves why authoritarians, even if you're curious, like you've lost your job, you've experienced all sorts of bad stuff under democracy, and you feel like you're in an authoritarian regime anyways because you do everything your boss says anyways. Even if you're curious about it, it's not going to work because Javad Zarif said he agrees with Trump about wanting to bring peace in Gaza. And, he's okay with moving 1 million Palestinians to Jordan and Egypt, all right? Displacing a small population to benefit a large one. Then he goes on to say that, because the question was, well, how do you know Trump's, why does Trump have any incentive to work with Iran on anything? And, he said that according to American measurements, Iran is just days away from a nuclear breakout. Now, I guess that's supposed to be some sort of veiled threat. But here's the thing. When I was at the Pentagon, popular sayings is, if we could just bring the Shah back to Iran, It'll be like the West Germany of the Middle East. And here's the deal. I don't think Trump, all right, he says that Trump is free from doing anything Israel says, right? But check this out. A guy like Trump, Russia has nuclear weapons. All kinds of U.S. adversaries have nuclear weapons. How do you know that he won't just eradicate the government in Tehran?
Yeah.
I mean, how does Zarif know that?
Shah is not coming back to Iran, and it's going to be real interesting to watch how this plays out, Dave, because my sense of it is that the Iranian government is running on fumes, but I may be very wrong. I don't know.
No, you're not wrong. Look, Tom, even Zarif said, look, these are not our proxies. Hamas is not our proxy. We just give them money. Look, here's what they proved. They're not going to risk regime change. Okay. Look, if you want a simpler example, look at what Vladimir Putin said. Well, Donald Trump is a smart guy. I want to talk to him one-on-one. He cares about the American economy. That's like Tony Soprano saying, wow, you got a nice house there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
Right. Nice little pizzeria Trump, you got here, yeah.
Yeah, they're never going to get along. It's going to get to a point to where, if Kim Jong-un or Putin or one of these guys have been dictators for a while, if they make a Tony Soprano threat, it's not a bluff. You better listen to it.
I agree.
They know.
Dave, well said. Yep. Thank you very much for that. Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Tom. How you doing?
Good.
And, this goes right to what I'm about to point out goes right to what you were saying about social media. I got to give big thanks to Bishop Marianne Buddy for her sermon when right in front of Trump when Trump was at that church, the same church in which he had the audacity to do a photo op outside of, if you recall.
Oh, is that the same church?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
wow.
That's the same. That is the same church, and she was the same bishop that said that he never came in and prayed with us, and this totally was upset at the fact that he used the church as a photo op with those fake police officers
I didn't realize that.
Yep. So here she is giving a sermon and saying about having mercy on those who are so afraid because of his bullying tactics, talking about empathy, all right? And then he and J.D. Vance and the other MAGAs are scoffing at her. She's actually using scripture to teach them something, and what could have been an opportunity for them to learn an important lesson and perhaps moving a road towards redemption, they just scoffed at her, calling her a public enemy, and then now there's ongoing threats against her and demanding her to apologize.
Yeah, now she's getting death threats.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
She will not back down or apologize.
Yeah, aren't we all so much safer now that Trump has emptied out the prisons, right? I mean, Trump goes on TV and he goes, oh, yeah, they're emptying out the prisons in Mexico and sending them here. No, he's emptying out the prisons and sending them into our cities. Come on, let's be clear about this. Yeah, spot on, Michael. Thank you very much. We're hitting the top of the hour. I'll be back with you on the other side of this break. Border Czar Homan says elementary schools could be targets. The inspectors general fired by Trump. I want to talk about that. And it's a death sentence. Our health insurance industry is killing us. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
Today we're reading about Thunderdome politics, an uncivil war taking back our democracy in an age of Trumpian disinformation and Thunderdome politics by Greg Sargent, the Washington Post columnist. This is from his chapter on voter suppression. It's page 37. Republicans and Democrats inhabit different political realities, as mentioned in a previous chapter. But there are certain facts about our politics that are just objectively true. One of them is this. Generally speaking, efforts to make it harder to vote are almost always pushed by Republicans. You cannot understand what is happening in American politics right now without recognizing this stark and very fundamental difference between the two major political parties. During this decade, procedural hurdles were put into place in around 20 states that in some manner or other have made it harder to vote or to register to vote, or have undone previous efforts to make voting or registering easier, or have otherwise threatened serious disenfranchisement. Most of them were the creation of Republican lawmakers and officials. The difference in the two parties' national platforms for 2016 tells the story. The GOP platform champions additional hurdles that are absurdly disproportionate to the phantom abuse it alleges, while the Democratic platform champions multiple specific ways to make it easier to vote, not harder. The most common and controversial of methods used by Republicans to suppress Democratic turnout is the requirement that would-be voters present identification at the polls. The game here tends to turn on requiring forms of ID that some groups are less likely to have, making participation harder for them. Other restrictions include techniques like cutting back on early voting and making it harder to register, both of which have, in recent years, been instituted in multiple states. Republicans who have passed laws making it harder to vote have tended to claim such measures are necessary to protect against, quote, voter fraud. We'll look at this in more detail below, but for now, note that most of the states that have passed such measures did so while under Republican control. As New York University political scientist Samuel Isikoff has memorably put it, the single predictor necessary to determine whether a state will impose voter access restrictions is whether Republicans control the ballot access process. Scholars trace the modern era of warfare over election rules to the intensely contested presidential election of 2000. In which a divided Supreme Court halted the recount in Florida, throwing the presidency to George W. Bush. The closeness and partisan acrimony of that contest, combined with the intense national focus on election rules that accompanied the court battle over it, helped persuade both parties to invest much more attention and energy on those rules. As a result, both the implementation of measures restricting the ballot and the legal battles over them have intensified in recent years. A brief glance at the surprising history of voter ID laws begins to tell the story of this tightening. In the 1970s, several states implemented voter ID measures, but all of them provided for ways that voters without the proper ID could cast a ballot. By 2000, there were 14 such laws, and they had been implemented by politicians in both parties. But by the mid-2000s, amid rising post-2000 acrimony, a handful of red states began implementing voter ID laws that the nonpartisan National Conference of State Legislatures described as, quote, strict, meaning that they make it easy to disqualify those who don't pass muster. After one of those laws in Indiana was challenged and then upheld in 2008 by the Supreme Court, an escalation began that gained momentum in the Obama era. From 2010 onward, the adoption of voter ID laws in general and of strict ones in particular accelerated. Though a handful were blocked in the courts, as of this writing, a total of 34 states have voter ID laws in effect, 24 that are deemed non-strict and 10 that are deemed strict. The strict ones are in red states or in swing states where they were implemented by Republicans. The story is very similar if you evaluate the state's voting rules in a broader way, by including not just voter ID measures, but also cutbacks to early voting and restrictions on registration. Here the trend is just as pronounced. After the 2010 elections, the Brennan Center for Justice documented a sharp rise in efforts to pass such measures in the state legislatures across the country. Not all these efforts bore fruit, but many did. By the time voting took place in Election Day 2016, some 14 states had these new restrictions in place for the first time in a presidential election. Now, as of this writing, by the Brennan Center's count, some 20 states have successfully implemented either strict voting ID requirements or cutbacks to early voting or restrictions on registration or other measures with meaningful disenfranchising effects. If you're a liberal who's frustrated by the seemingly unbreakable Republican dominance of national politics, not to mention GOP control of most state governments across the country, then the chances are that these restrictions figure heavily into your explanation of this GOP supremacy. Indeed, social media has been absolutely saturated in recent years with variations of the lament that Republican political dominance is largely maintained through a combination of nefarious and undemocratic tactics, such as ballot restrictions that keep constituencies unfriendly to the GOP from voting, and extreme gerrymanders that have, in effect, built a fortress around the GOP's majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats frequently invoke the GOP's use of these tactics, often justifiably, to raise money and to galvanize turnout. This narrative contains some important truths. Some of the forms that these restrictions on voting access have taken in recent years are diabolically obvious in their efforts to keep constituencies supportive of Democrats from voting. Still others boast the distinction of being more insidiously designed and thus less obvious in their intentions. The book is An Uncivil War by Greg Sargent of The Washington Post.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. So Donald Trump over the weekend says that he wants to clean out Gaza. Now, this is not a new sentiment, by the way, and I think that, you know, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, it's particularly important that we consider the consequences of ethnic cleansing, because that's what this is. It's removing one group of people, in this case, Muslims, Gazans, Arabs, removing them and replacing them with another group of people. In Trump and Kushner's mind, that would be Jews from Israel. And this is also, this is not considered a fringe theory in Israel itself. You've got members of Netanyahu's cabinet who are, explicitly advocating this very scenario. 90% of all the housing in Gaza has been destroyed or damaged to the point of uninhabitability. 90%. This is like the bombing of Dresden in World War II. And by the way, the stated goal of this, now this obviously was not the real goal, but Netanyahu's stated goal was to crush Hamas. Hamas is bigger than it was when this started. There are more people committed to Hamas than when this started. And now there will be millions of children who will spend their entire lives dedicated to destroying Israel and killing Jews. Netanyahu could have done what previous governments did when atrocities were visited upon Jews. Consider, I think it was 1972, when a bunch of Jewish athletes were murdered at the Munich Olympic Games. And Israel said, okay, we're going to find these people and we're going to kill them. It took them a decade. There's been a movie made out of it. You know, this book's been written about it. It took them a decade, but they tracked down every single one of the people involved in that massacre and either killed them or arrested them and held them for trial. Every single one of them. They could have done the same thing with the people who planned the October 7th atrocity, and it was an atrocity. They could have done it thoughtfully, carefully, step by step. But no, instead they wanted to drop 2,000-pound bombs on civilians. And now Donald Trump is saying, so now, now that 90% of the housing is gone, I mean, this is what he said. He said, Gaza is literally a demolition site. Almost everything is demolished and people are dying there. So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing at a different location where they can maybe live in peace for a change. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? He says, I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. You're talking about 1.5 million people, and we can just clean out that whole thing. Now, he is echoing a message that Jared Kushner shared at Harvard University about, 2 years ago? Where this was, it was February 15th. I guess that was, maybe it was this year. I thought it was last year. But maybe it was as recently as this February. But no, this is January, so it would have been last year. At Harvard University, this is what Kushner said. He said, quote, Gaza's waterfront property could be very valuable if people would focus on building up livelihoods. He said it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterwards. Well, no, the country hasn't officially said that. But members of Netanyahu's cabinet have certainly said that. This is wild stuff. This is just wild stuff. And this is not helping Israel. I have long been a fan of Israel, the one democracy in the middle of the Middle East that's surrounded by autocracies and kingdoms. But since Netanyahu took over, and this corrupt criminal, much like the guy who's running our country now, I mean, they're buds for a reason. In fact, Netanyahu used to sleep in Jared Kushner's house when he visited the United States. That's how tight this whole little cabal is. Since that has happened, Israel has changed. It's really tragic, particularly on this Holocaust Remembrance Day, to contemplate the damage that Netanyahu has done to the reputation of this country that used to be thought of as, a model democratic republic, and now is viewed as an outlaw, as a renegade, as a perpetrator of genocide. It's tragic. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's border czar, Thom Hartmann, was on ABC over the weekend with Martha Raddatz. And she said, Benjamin Huffman, the acting Homeland Security Secretary, said in a statement, quote, criminals will no longer be able to hide in America's schools and churches to avoid arrest. What criminals are hiding in schools? Middle schools, elementary schools? You're going to go into those? And Homan says, how many MS-13 people age of 14 to 17? Many of them. In other words, yes, we're going to go into the schools and we're going to take out the kids. He says these are well-trained officers with a lot of discretion. When it comes to a sensitive location, there's going to be a supervisory review, but ICE officers should have discretion to decide if a national security threat or public safety threat that's in one of these facilities, then it should be an option for them to make the arrest. Raddatz went on to say, there's fear in this community, in the immigrant community, and he says, opening up to anyone in the country illegally, this is what Raddatz said. She says, opening up to anyone who's in the country illegally and going into schools and grabbing them, does that mean kids? And he says, the message needs to be clear. There's consequences of entering the country illegally. Well, yeah, I get that. And frankly, let's be very clear. We have been deporting immigrants, undocumented people, particularly undocumented people who have committed crimes, every single day through the Biden administration, every single day through the Obama administration. In fact, Obama deported more people than Trump did in his first term. This is not some brand new thing. But Trump is turning it into campaign stuff. That's what's really going on right now. is let's make this as public as possible. Let's bring along Dr. Phil because, you know, the TV cameras love Dr. Phil. Let's have the ICE officers just, you know, dress up in their very best outfits and bring a camera crew along and invite the networks. When Biden did it, when Obama did it, it was kind of low key. You know, we're just going to take out the people who are the criminals. Although I can tell you, you know, from personal experience, during the Obama administration, one of my cousins married a guy who was in the United States illegally. He was Mexican. He was running a Mexican restaurant in this little town where she lived, which he had started. He had created a business and was, you know, helping the American economy. And he got busted for being here illegally. He hadn't committed any crime at all. And she called me up and she was all upset, you know, what can I do? And I reached out to Bernie Sanders' office. And his office reached out to ICE, and ICE said, sorry, he's here illegally. He's leaving. And he got deported. And she moved to Mexico. She's been living in Mexico for 15 years now. With him and their kids, you know, their 3, 4, 5 kids, whatever it is, I don't recall. They've got a bunch of kids. So this isn't something new. But Trump is putting a whole new face on it, frankly, a racist face. And, you know, this is being done partly for the benefit of his base and partly for for just making people think that, you know, this guy can do anything, right? He's strong. He's a tough guy. And that, you know, particularly when people are worried. I mean, you got half of America that's living paycheck to paycheck right now. There's a lot of concern and fear out there. When people are worried, they tend to want authoritarianism. They tend to want strongman leadership. They want daddy to save them. Mel Gibson over the weekend saying, you know, Trump, daddy is coming home and he's taking off his belt. Yes, right. Isn't that what we want?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's kind of an echo of Tucker Carlson talking about, you know, how Trump is daddy and he's going to come and punish the girls. And welcome back. And let's see who's been on hold the longest here. Daniel in Santa Monica. Hey, Daniel, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it. My call is regarding Bernie Sanders and forming a coalition and kind of the crickets that are going on, nothing to be heard of. But firstly, thank you for mentioning the fact that the Dems, and I am a Democrat, I have been for my life long, and I just want to say that you're spot on with what happened to the messaging. Why did Biden and any of the leaders in the Democratic Party, why was there no fireside chat, quote unquote? You know, they call it because it's insane that we were years of Trump's free press at every turn.
Yep, billions of dollars worth of free coverage of what's called earned media.
Exactly. Train wrecks are obviously more moneymakers than having some sound, fireside chat sort of thing. But my question is about what do you feel about Bernie Sanders? There was, in the latter part of the year, there was talk or blips about him creating a third-party coalition. What do you think it would take, because of the essence, it seems with politics, especially right now, just everything is such a flurry of Trump's vomiting. What would it take for Bernie to have an inkling of that and becoming and even moving forward with something like that, since the midterms will be coming, and how would that?
Bernie never suggested that, Daniel. That was some fringy people on the left saying that Bernie ought to start a third party. Third parties don't work in America. We have first past the post, winner take all elections, primaries and general elections. And the consequence of that in any country at any time is that you can only basically have two political parties. Otherwise, the third party starts basically drawing away from the party that it's most closely philosophically aligned with, which in this case would be the Democrats. It would be a disaster. It's why Bernie ran as a Democrat when he ran for president. Bernie understands this. Bernie has condemned efforts, to do third parties. So I think the chances of that are zero.
Okay.
To answer your question.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
One last thing. I just want. Do you think the Republicans, the same ones that have a spine left or a soul left, have a safe word in case Trump goes off the rails and it's no longer acceptable? Do you think there's something that could happen where they would actually conform, work with the Democrats and call on the 25th Amendment to have him removed?
He's already gone off the rails. I mean, he put an alcoholic accused rapist in charge of the Defense Department, for God's sake. And no, I didn't hear Mitt Romney say a word. I didn't hear any of the quote credible, thoughtful, real Republican. I mean, it's just, it's crazy talk.
Yeah.
So no, I think that the Republican Party has been castrated. I think Donald Trump has completely eliminated their ability or willingness to stand up to him, and that's a very, very bad sign for America, by the way. The Democratic Party at least still has internal dissidents, which is a good thing. It's a healthy thing, but not the Republican Party. The Republican Party has completely fallen in line, and that's a danger to this country. Daniel, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Other countries enjoy benefits like free health care in college, modern mass transit, affordable housing, food, and drugs. They also have inexpensive internet and phone service without companies listening and selling their information. Schools that don't need to mention school shooters. Streets and parks filled with pedestrians and children instead of tents and homeless people. We, on the other hand, have the world's largest collection of billionaires. Most Americans probably didn't realize this was the choice they were making back in the election of 1980 when Reagan and Bush promised morning in America. But here we are. We have been just basically sold out to the billionaires by all these years of Republican, Reaganomics. What do we do about it? Well, there's a lot we can do about it, and it starts with getting politically active. There's a great op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, America Chose Wealth Over Well-Being. Check it out. Welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. Amazing. Brazil. Brazil was, very concerned that the immigrants who were deported to Brazil came off the planes with their hands and ankles shackled. Edgar da Silva Moura, who was a 31-year-old computer technician who had been 7 months in detention in the United States, he was on the plane. He said, on the plane, they didn't give us water. We had our hands tied. Our feet were tied. They wouldn't even let us go to the bathroom. It was very hot. Some people fainted. Apparently, this 4-hour flight, apparently due to technical issues on the plane, the air conditioning failed. Well, planes fly where it's 30 degrees below zero at that altitude, So how does the air conditioning fail? It seems to me like this was one last punishment for these people. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has fired 18 inspectors general. Now, he did it illegally, but the Supreme Court says Donald Trump doesn't have to obey the law. He's a special boy. And so I'm guessing that there will be no consequence to him for breaking the law. Adam Schiff came out on Sunday and huffed and puffed about it. He said, if we don't have good and independent inspectors general, we're going to see a swamp refill. It may be the president's goal here to remove anyone that's going to call the public's attention to his malfeasance. Gee, you think so? I mean, come on, Senator. Let's just be very clear. Inspectors general, first of all, these positions were created by an act of Congress to provide oversight, independent oversight of these major federal agencies, you know, from the DEA to the Department of Defense, right? Every one of these major agencies has an inspector general. And what the inspector generals are looking for is corruption. Nothing else. They're not there to determine if the agency is fulfilling its job. They're not there to determine if they're hiring enough, you know, women or black people or something like that. It's got nothing to do with anything that Republicans are all hysterical about right now. The inspectors general are there to look for waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the phrase that is in the legislation creating them. And fraud is the biggest part of it. So it's the inspectors general who would raise the alarm and hand off for prosecution if somebody in, for example, the Pentagon were to say, oh, well, Donald Trump's best friend is a defense contractor. I think we'll buy all our bombs from him. And I'm going to get a kickback. I mean, that's probably the most simplistic example. Most corruption in these agencies is far more sophisticated and far more subtle. And that's why it takes an inspector general to ferret it out. So why would Donald Trump get rid of the guys whose job is to stop fraud within the agencies? Because these $8 a year. And Donald Trump and his buddies want a piece of that action. And they don't want anybody who's looking out for fraud or waste or abuse to be looking over their shoulder. We should just call this what this is. This is the swamp, right? This is the corruption of Washington, D.C. done by Donald Trump illegally with no pushback. I mean, the Justice Department is not saying, hey, wait a minute, Donald, you can't do that. You're breaking the law. Why? Because the Justice Department's Inspector General has been fired. There's nobody now looking out for your interests and my interests. In each one of these agencies, the only person in the agency, I mean, arguably the head of the agencies are supposed to be looking out for the interests of the American people. But, you know, I mean, Donald Trump is like, he puts a fossil fuel lobbyist in charge of the Energy Department. Right? What kind of energy is America going to have, do you think? Could it be fossil fuels? What a surprise. So, yeah, the heads of the agencies themselves are often corrupt. I mean, look at what he did with the EPA last time. And he's doing it again. And the only person in these agencies who's there to look out for your interests and my interests as taxpayers and citizens of this country who expect a functioning democratic republic, a functioning government that acts on our behalf, not on the behalf of some rich friend of Donald Trump's. Those people are now out on their keisters. Let's just call it what it is. This is the beginning of the most corrupt administration in American history.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
27 minutes past the hour. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Taking bullets, terrorism and black life in 21st century America, confronting white nationalism, supremacy, privilege, plutocracy, and oligarchy, a poet's representation and challenge by Haki R. Madhuburi. He writes, this is from the chapter, page 27, the chapter, Terror in the Midst of Prayer and Empire. In our perpetual state of national mourning, where our eyes are watered out and our hearts cease to heal at the rate the Creator meant them to, We hold hands in profound silence as we remember the Mother Emanuel 9 of Charleston, South Carolina. Those 9 mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Even before burying, before black earth covered their caskets, too many ministers, media pundits, and plain white and black folks downgraded the terror that quickened their deaths of our finest in this land to the mental illness and race hatred, in quotes, of a single young white man. He may have acted alone, but he was not alone in his thinking, encouragement, gathering of arms, warped consciousness, confirmation, or ahistorical views, and yeses from the millions in the nation who proudly wear and display the Confederate flag above their hearts and fly it in all of its traitorous glory over a state capitol and other institutions. Again, we find ourselves at war with history and culture, entertaining another call for a national conversation on race and a president weary of trying to make sense of and comfort the grief-stricken nation with words from the highest office of the land. This was written while Obama was president. These are the facts, not an opinion or the ignorant ranting of compromised preachers and television pundits. A 21-year-old white man, a citizen of South Carolina, walked into the sacred and spiritual home of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston, the historic home of black liberation fighter Denmark Vesey, and fatally killed 9 of its members, including the pastor, during Bible study. This was a pure act of domestic terrorism. A modern-day lynching by a young white nationalist who coolly and calmly assassinated 9 black members of Mother Emanuel. Domestic violence and acts of terrorism are on the rise in the United States, as detailed by Charles Kurzman and Daniel Schanzer in their New York Times op-ed, The Other Threat, where they state that, quote, the main terrorist threat in the United States is not from violent Muslim extremists, but from right-wing extremists, end quote. In their national research, local police agencies across the country identified, quote, the militias, neo-Nazis, and sovereign citizens as the major threat the nation faces in regard to extremism, end quote. All of this is homegrown with international connections. Morris Dees and J. Richard Cohen of the Southern Poverty Law Center also writes in the New York Times article, Racists Without Borders, that, quote, Americans tend to view attacks like the mass murder in Charleston as isolated hate crimes, the work of a deranged racist or a group of zealots lashing out in anger unconnected to a broader movement. This view we can no longer afford to indulge. When, according to survivors, Mr. Roof told the victims at the prayer meeting that black people were, quote, taking over the country, he was expressing sentiments that unite white nationalists from the United States and Canada to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Unlike those of the Civil Rights era, whose main goal was to maintain Jim Crow in the American South, today's white supremacists don't see borders. They see a white tribe under attack by people of color across the globe. The end of white rule in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and South Africa, they believe, foreshadowed an apocalyptic future for all white people, a white genocide that must be stopped before it's too late. End of quote. The internationalization of terrorism is not a foreign theory in today's social media world. Dees and Cohen will be speaking at a conference in Budapest about this transnational white supremacism that is emerging as the world grows more connected technologically. The message of white genocide is spreading. Also, David J. Whitaker's Terrorism, Understanding the Global Threat, gives another view. Clearly, our rush to forgive within 96 hours of this supreme tragedy is misguided, anti-human, and does not allow for properly grieving the fallen. As perfectly scripted, displaying the permanent effectiveness of Christian acculturation on the Sunday, June 21st, 2015 morning services of Mother Emanuel Church, the black Christians out-Christianed their white brothers and sisters. Before the morning sermon, the presiding elder, Reverend Norvell Goff Sr., found it necessary to thank the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies for doing their job. He also stated, quote, a lot of folks expected us to do something strange and break out in a riot. Well, they just don't know us. We are people of faith, end quote. I find this statement inappropriate, insensitive, and ahistorical, implying, whether he meant it or not, that the recent uprising and rebellions in Ferguson, New York, Cleveland, and other parts of the nation were riots and did not include black people of faith, and that somehow they were strange in their social, political, and economic activism. Informed people do not riot against injustice or white terrorism. They study, organize, and strategically struggle at all levels, in the streets, on the campus, in front of the White House, and in corporate boardrooms. Dylan Roof his stated intentions were to start a race war, and informed black leadership understands that we cannot pray this away or appeal to any law enforcement agency that all across the country, including Charleston, has been seriously compromised. To label black reaction to murder, terrorism, deep unemployment, substandard housing, etc. as riot is to blame the victim.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. So when a political party embraces violence as a political tool, what is the end game? Where does this lead? How does this work out? How does this end? We've seen this in other countries historically. In fact, we tend to refer to them as fascist countries. We saw it in Germany and Spain and Italy in the 30s. We saw it in the 60s in Chile with Pinochet. It appears to be happening now here in America as well. We have Republican politicians calling for violence, calling for civil war, preaching violence along, and not to mention the former president, Donald Trump, basically begging for violence to defend him. And how does this work out? It tends not to work out well. And there's a whole HartmannReport.com is titled, "What is the End Game for a Party of Violence?" Check it out.
In the shadows, the vultures wait, feeding on fear, serving up hate. Every broadcast a bullet fired, killing the truth they once inspired. Fascism rising, truth dying slow. Trump's behind the curtain, don't you know? They take our voices, they twist the air. In a world of darkness, truth is rare.
Go back 35 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Tom in Media, Pennsylvania. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I mean, earlier you were mentioning, why in the world will MAGA vote for? Is MAGA going to get out of Donald Trump what they, hope they voted for? Well, a lot of people voted for Donald Trump are not MAGAs. Now, they lost skilled unions. The Democrats lost a lot of skilled union voters this time, and I'm a skilled union person. And well, first of all, I'm going to mail you much more detailed information about why skilled unions left, because I'm one of them. But there's 3 reasons, major reasons. Number one, at least for 4 years, we don't have to worry about losing our health care. We have health care that we sacrificed decades for. It gives us not only access, but scheduling priority.
And Donald Trump is going to protect your health care, Tom? Seriously? You think he gives a rat's ass about you?
He's not going to harm it with this Medicare for All 2023, which I don't think you've even read, Tom, the way you talk about it. But I'll give you detailed information. Also, that $1,300 to $3,000 tax cut is important to us. The Democrats downplay it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I get it. You're greedy. You don't want to pay your fair share of taxes. That's fine, Tom. What's your third reason for loving Trump?
At least we pay taxes. My third reason is that 80% of us don't have children. They're skilled unions, and the new way
the people with kids.
Well, you can call us greedy. You can call us selfish, Tom. I have an argument for that too. Okay, but don't call us stupid. But don't call us stupid. Don't call us.
I would say that anybody who thinks that putting their own personal extra $10,000 a year on top of the $100,000 plus that they're making is stupid. Putting that over the good of the country. Yeah, I would say that's stupid, Tom. Caleb in Chicago. Hey, Caleb, what's on your mind today?
Thank you for taking my call, Tom. Very interesting call that you just had.
Yeah.
I want to definitely agree with you. This is the most corrupt administration that I've ever seen, or maybe they're just more open about it. We're sadly all watching it happen. And what's really driving me nuts is watching our elder congressmen, maybe I'm not saying the right, elder congresspeople, senators, just watching it happen and trying to play this good game of yesterday. At least we have younger people that are coming up like Jasmine Crockett, that are really trying to take it to them. And I think we need more people like that. And it's really sad because to me, it's obvious now that the billionaires just control everything. I mean, I read an article in USA Today this past weekend that said that Trump really cares about women because he just passed this, woman and man only two sex thing. And that shows that, they're really trying to protect women. And I really just can't believe that the whole, I guess I can, because again, the media is owned by the billionaires. But I actually agree with something you said, Greg Palast. Greg Palast isn't what he produces. My daughter loves it, who wants to be a judge. But long story short, you're correct. We need to start doing things that are shocking and actually can create some buzz.
Yeah,
just
political
like how
theater.
you had said, we need political theater. We need to put together a group that actually challenges Republicans and their votes, and then there will start to be a stink about it, and then they'll be able to put a stop to that. And we need to find little ways to do little things like that because we don't own the media, and our message doesn't make it up. We need to actually do things that are going to create that little enough of people going, what the heck is going on over here? And that way we can get attention to the things that are actually happening because most people that voted for Trump really don't realize the evil that he is. They're just more pressed on that we've got all these brown people illegally in our country.
Yeah, or they think that he's going to give them a tax break and and they're making over $100,000 a year like my previous caller. Yeah, I get it. Caleb, thank you. Spot on. Thank you. Paul in Ambler, Pennsylvania. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to go over your flaw of the Democratic Party having to do with the media, that they're really not as adept at it as the Republicans. I think it's not just the media, it's the content. I'm calling from Pennsylvania, and we had an inundation of money come here because we were a swing state. Elon Musk was personally here giving out $1 million checks.
Right.
And he had a ground game going on. They're organizing and they're going out into shopping malls with clipboards, and they're doing what the Democrats have been doing for the last, 40 years. Mm-hmm. But here's the main thing that I'm concerned about. My criticism is the content. The Democrats are crime deniers the way the Republicans are climate deniers. There's a whole raft of articles that come out every year after January the 1st about crime has gone down. We only have 240 murders instead of 475. Whoopee! It's 39% fewer murders in Philadelphia or Chicago. I mean, these articles are in the national publications too. And that's supposed to convince people that, things under Biden were really improving and he was doing the right things. It's insane.
But things under Biden actually were improving, Paul.
Okay, you're insane, Tom. It's not improving. Tens of thousands of people are being murdered every year.
No, I get that, but I'm telling you, things improved under Biden.
Well, that's good. That's good. When Asheville was underwater, what did you say? That it's just a little flood. Things are improving. It's much cooler in Philadelphia now that it's not 110 degrees because that's -0 now because of the polar ice.
Because that was Joe Biden's fault.
No, it's not Joe Biden's fault. That's not the problem. This is ongoing. Murders didn't start in Philadelphia or Chicago or Memphis or Los Angeles last year, 20 years ago. It's been going on for 40 or 50 years. The number one reason is there's too many guns.
Since the beginning of humanity, Paul.
Well, yeah, I know. Adam raised the Cain. I get that. 1 million guns were sold last year in Pennsylvania. It's got to stop. And the Democrats have to get on the air and show every mass shooting and every crumpled body at a bus stop where 20 people were shot for no reason.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of that.
I wish
the media would. The media refuses to show any of these pictures.
Well,
but again,
when they run
this
the
isn't
commercials,
Joe Biden's fault.
I didn't say it was Joe Biden's fault.
Well,
I'm saying it's the Democrat. No, I'm not implying it. What are you trying to sniff out? Like I'm a traitor to the Democrats? I'm a committeeman, Tom. I don't need to take this crap off of you. Okay? Joe Biden, as far as I'm concerned, did more for this country since LBJ.
Thank you. So I don't get your concern.
You're denying the severity of crime.
Paul, take a deep breath here. Take a deep breath.
Too severe.
Just take a deep breath here. You started off all upset because there was a newspaper article, or there's a bunch of them, saying that crime is down right now. Why are you
every
upset
year.
about that? Well, they're not
because
every year.
It's a
Some
lie.
years crime
we
is up.
don't live in statistics. People live when they go to the funerals. People go and they walk by, the blood on the streets. People are in trauma. They're not coming out to vote in Philadelphia. Fewer people voted for Biden than for, excuse me, in the previous election when he ran. And the reason is they're in shock. They can't take it anymore.
I mean, that's part of it. Part of it is that a lot of people have no idea what good stuff he did during the 4 years he was in. The media didn't talk about it, and he didn't talk about it. Part of it is that they're really you get people really upset about his support of Gaza. Part of it is that Trump has just dominated. I mean, there's a whole bunch of variables here. I get it that you're upset about the murder rate in Pennsylvania, but that's not.
It's all over They had 9. The peak was in Chicago, 900 murders. Sure. I've listened to your call. I don't always call in, but I hear people. I hear women in shock calling in from Chicago. They sound like they're traumatized. They peaked at 900 murders. We have more murders in 1 year than in all of Afghanistan and Iraqi wars in 20. It's ridiculous.
So what do you want to do about it, Paul?
We need to have commercials with content that say we're going to take every goddamn handgun off of every goddamn American, whether they like it or not.
I'm all in favor of gun control, and you're absolutely right that if we reduce the number of guns, this was the experience of Australia after 1996 or 7 when they had this mass shooting in Tasmania. They passed legislation to, they did a gun buyback program. They bought back hundreds of thousands of guns. They outlawed semi-automatic weapons unless you have a permit, unless you have a reason to have it. And they didn't have another they've had one more mass shooting in all the years since then, and the murder rate just dropped precipitously. You're absolutely right. And Democrats should lead that, but you're not going to get that from Republicans. Not ever. Not ever, ever.
No, we're not going to get it from Republicans. But you know what? They overturned Roe versus Wade. We can overturn this Second Amendment lie. People don't have a right to commit murder on a massive warlike level.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Nobody believes
Paul,
that.
Finally. Paul, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Talk Media for the rest of us. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Mike in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Tom, thanks for taking my call. My issue is with AARP.
Oh, boy.
Trump reverses Biden's executive order on lowering prices for prescription on drugs.
Right.
Today, there are 38 million members of AARP. Their mission statement is to fight for the rights of old people, both Republican old people and Democrats. Social Security and lowering prescription costs is their mission statement in helping seniors. Joanne Jenkins is the CEO of AARP. Why is nobody on TV or in public fighting against Trump and the GOP, fighting for seniors, both Democrats and Republicans?
Well, Mike, the AARP probably won't, and I don't know because I don't get their stuff because I have never subscribed because I always knew that AARP was principally an insurance agency. They make almost all of their money or most of their money selling insurance. Most of it, in fact, I think all of it from United Healthcare. And they make a pile, the biggest pile of their money selling Medicare Advantage, United Healthcare Medicare Advantage policies. So if they were to, bite the hand that feeds them, as it were, if they were to go after Trump, I would frankly be very surprised. They promote themselves as an advocacy organization, but their real mission is to sell insurance.
Also, Tom, the previous caller that you had in the line, the number one importer of weapons to Mexico, like the president of Mexico said, the lady,
is the United
States. We have weapons that come in from America that go to Mexico. That's where the weapons are used to kill Mexican people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Mike, thanks for the call. Deborah in Los Angeles. Hey, Deborah, what's up?
Hi. I wanted to tap into some of this working class anger you're getting from Eastern Pennsylvania.
It seems like a few people woke up on the wrong side of the bed today.
But you know what? I mean, I feel it, and I think you feel it too. Yeah. I put to you. I put this to you. Donald Trump is a guy who couldn't make money running a casino. Now, therefore, a terrible businessman.
Literally.
Yeah, the house always wins. He's the worst Tony Soprano in the world.
Yeah, 2 casinos go bankrupt. It's incredible. And then Las Vegas wouldn't let him open a third one because they said he was too corrupt and too tied into organized crime. That should tell you something.
No, exactly. And these 2 guys from Philly, they never went to Atlantic City. Come on. Yeah. So here's the deal. And this is the thing that confounds me, because authoritarianism is not a good way to get to a growing economy. It's a way to shrink an economy and make it a mob, a grift.
A mobocracy.
If Trump were smart, right? I mean, okay, yeah, in a world where Trump is smart, he would go into these meat processing plants and say, I give you all amnesty, like Reagan. He would say, let's go make some money. Let's get back to work. And that would be a real populism, and it might even get me on board.
I would take it a step beyond that, Deborah. I would say that if Trump really wanted to defend American workers, he would go into these meat packing plants and say to the white millionaire owners, you are going to jail because you broke the law by hiring people who are not citizens. And suddenly you'd have unionized labor back in the meat packing plants like there was 30 years ago. But, Reagan changed that equation in the 80s, and it just never got changed back. Deborah, I got to run, but thank you for the call. 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay with me. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew both took cash bribes while they were in the White House. Since then, the Supreme Court, or at least 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, made it a lot easier for politicians to take bribes with their Citizens United decision, which basically legalized political bribery as long as it's done through campaigns or PACs or super PACs. But for some people, there's just never enough money, right? Donald Trump has been running small-time hustles to make money for decades, selling sneakers, Bibles, steaks, vodka, water. But now he's hit the big time. He's got these fungible tokens, right? These fungible crypto assets, which are basically just digital pictures of Donald Trump that say, fight, fight, fight. And he has turned them into an $8 billion machine. His wife is in on this, too, with his Trump coin. It's a new way that foreign powers and billionaires in the United States can just shovel money into Donald Trump's pocket. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled Presidential Payola, The Evolution of Political Bribery. Check it out. Welcome back, 9 minutes before the hour, and picking up your calls here, Joe in Spring, Texas. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hey, good afternoon. I heard you say earlier that President Obama was called the deporter-in-chief, and he mainly focused on deporting criminals.
Well, I didn't say either of those two things.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
I said that deporter-in-chief was, a phrase, a derogatory phrase that was used to identify by Obama because he did deport more people than Donald Trump did, for example, or pretty much anybody before him. And I get that. And certainly ICE has always been looking for criminals as their top priority. But now that Trump has sent out a memo to all of the ICE offices saying each office must arrest 75 people a day, they're not even going to bother looking for criminals because it takes weeks to build a criminal case. You can just grab somebody off the street who's here without documentation in 25 minutes. So you're going to see a big change right now. But I'm guessing you were going somewhere with that, Joe. Back to you.
Well, no, logical reasoning and deduction is if he deported more people and he focused on deporting criminals, then that would mean there's an awful lot of criminals in this country that shouldn't be here, right?
Well, there were certainly a couple 100,000 of them, apparently, yeah.
Couple 100,000, is that all Obama deported?
Well, frankly, I don't know, Joe. I just know that the number was larger than what Trump did the following 4
Well,
years.
a couple 100,000 is a couple 100,000 way too many, don't you think?
I completely agree.
Oh, well, good. Then you'll agree with Trump getting rid of them.
I have no problem with any administration deporting people who've committed crimes, and I don't think that people should be coming into this country without documentation. I want a country where people who are here legally. You can't have a functioning country if you don't enforce citizenship rules. I mean, it's just simple logic, Joe.
Okay. And I did hear this morning that one of the group of people that he rounded up in the last couple of days were actually manufacturing and selling some sort of equipment to make a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon.
Yeah, it may well be. There's a lot of that going on in the country right now, and it's also a crime. So whether it's being done by Native American citizens or whether it's done, by American citizens, or whether it's being done by people who are here without documentation, they should go to jail. Joe, thanks for the call. Martin in Cincinnati. Hey, Martin, what's up?
Oh, not a lot. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I watched one of your clips about how the wealthy are out for our lives. And the thing is, a lot of regular working class people are blinded, and they think that the wealthy have their best interest in mind. And it's been quite frustrating trying to break down why they do not have the best interest of the working in mind.
Right. Well, all you have to do is look at a $36 trillion budget deficit that's 100% entirely the result of Reagan, Bush, and Trump tax cuts, and Bush putting $7 trillion worth of wars on our national credit card, to see that the wealthy who drove this process don't give a rat's ass about average Americans. I mean, we're spending $800 billion a year on interest on our national debt. I think it was $640 billion last year on interest on the national debt, and it's going to be over $800 this year. And that's money that could be used to build roads, to improve schools, to fund Medicaid or Medicare, to fund a national health care system, to take care of our veterans. There's a lot of things that could be done with that money that, but rich people, hey, they got their tax breaks. That's all they give a damn about. I mean, you've got the Koch network now, or the Americans for Prosperity, announcing that they're going to do this massive, influence campaign to try to get a whole new set of tax cuts out of Trump.
And to make matters worse, when they parrot all the talking points of the wealthy, they'll say something to the point of, oh, if you don't like what the rich are doing, if you don't like how your life is being affected, then go get some money for yourself. They always say those talking points.
Yeah, I had a conservative call into the show echoing one of these BS talking points from the Reagan era, who said, I've never been hired by a poor man. And I was like, I've never been rich, but I've hired probably 200 people in my life. I keep starting companies. I'm a serial entrepreneur. There are a lot of small businesses that are being run by people who are not rich, and
they're middle class.
Yeah, and in fact,
middle to upper middle class.
Yeah, exactly, which is what I am. And that and I hire a bunch of people. I've got a bunch of people working for me right now, and this you don't have to be a billionaire to be a so-called job creator, but the real job creators are the average working people who are buying things. And this is, this understanding of how economies work is so absent on the right, on the Republican right. It's a real tragedy, Martin. It really is. And
they're reaching out to these young kids who are very impressionable.
I know. Who just don't know, because we don't teach civics in our classrooms any longer. I mean, you thank Ronald Reagan for that. Martin, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Spot on. And thanks for watching us on YouTube. We'll be back on the other side of the break with the third hour of the program. It's a death sentence. The U.S. health insurance system is failing. Well, it's failing us. It's not failing its billionaire investors and CEOs.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air. so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms, in our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until, at last, we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits, in that secret, a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Koch. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. It's a death sentence. U.S. health insurance system is failing, say doctors. This is a remarkable piece of investigative reporting over at The Guardian by Michael Sainato, S-A-I-N-A-T-O. He writes, American doctors are accusing U.S. health insurance giants of causing deadly delays to vital medical procedures and care and putting profits ahead of their patients' health. He quotes the former chief medical officer for Express Scripts, which is one of the largest prescription benefit managers in the U.S. His name is Dr. Ed Weisbart. He writes, there's good evidence that these kinds of delays literally kill people. For some people, this isn't just an inconvenience and an annoyance and an aggravation. It's a death sentence. And the only reason the insurance companies do this is to maximize their profits. The fact that they might be killing you is not in the equation of what they care about. We spend more on health care in the United States than any other country in the world, both absolute numbers and per capita. And we have the worst health outcomes in the entire developed world. And, you know, this is something we should pay attention to, right? Dr. Cheryl Kunis is the board member at PNHP, the Physicians for National Health program, and a nephrologist in New York City. And she had some specific thoughts about that. She talks about one of her patients had a tumor. And before they decided on how to treat it, they needed to know if it had spread. And so they needed a PET scan. And this is what she says, and I quote, The surgeon was very honest that he only wanted to operate if the tumor was localized, and without the PET scan, he really would not be able to make that decision. The surgeon and his office, as well as my office, spent hours on the phone. We were speaking to somebody who was sitting at United Healthcare in front of a computer screen who was really not knowledgeable on the underlying medical problem or the test that we were asking for the patient to have. And then the reporter notes, after an initial denial, the patient's appeal for the scan was ultimately approved 6 months later, and by that time, the patient had died. Kunis says, we assume that if he had been diagnosed earlier, he might have been able to do better. Gee, you think? This is a healthcare society. You know, I shared the story with you last week about the doctor who was in the middle of cancer surgery, breast cancer surgery on a patient who was unconscious on the table, you know, in the ER, the OR, the operating room, and they had her all cut open and were cutting into her breast to remove the tumor. And a nurse runs in and says, Doctor, United Healthcare is on the phone. You got to talk to them. And so he leaves the operating theater, takes the call, and they're like, well, we're not sure we want to pay for this. And does she really need an overnight stay in the hospital after this surgery? And the doctor's like, I'm in the middle of surgery. I had to scrub out for this. I'm going to have to spend 20 minutes scrubbing back, you know, before I can even go back. Are you crazy? And they're like, well, and the person at United Healthcare was like, well, you know, I'm not the person who has the medical knowledge. You know, I'm just making the calls that I'm supposed to, or whatever. You know, I mean, this is what's going on. It's obviously not just United Healthcare, although they're in the news a lot, in part because of Luigi Mangione, and in part because they have the highest rate of denial of claims of you know, doctors saying, hey, this person needs a test, hey, this person needs surgery, hey, this person needs this or that, and United Healthcare, according to the reports I've read in the media, have the highest rate of refusal. But they're also the biggest. They're an absolute behemoth, and they're making a pile of money. I mean, the guy who was one of the founders of the company, you know, Dollar Bill McGuire, he was the first CEO of United Healthcare, I believe, walked away with $1.6 billion. He had to pay back $200 or $300 million because he was charged with fraud to avoid the fraud charge. This entire industry is like a giant swamp, to use the Maga phrase. Meanwhile, Donald Trump commits to leaving hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes uncollected because they would have been collected from his billionaire buddies. We're no longer going to investigate billionaires for their taxes. Now, he didn't say exactly that. What he said was, on day one, I immediately halted the hiring of any new IRS agents. They hired or tried to hire 80,000 workers to go after you, and we're in the process of developing a plan to either terminate all of them or maybe we'll move them to the border. And then he goes on about, these are people with guns. Well, these are all lies. It's a long debunked lie, in fact. The 80,000 new IRS agents is just complete BS. Where that came from was back in August of 2022, Brian Kilmeade, sitting in for Tucker Carlson, told the tale of Joe Biden's new army that will hunt down and kill middle-class taxpayers with guns. There was legislation to increase the budget of the IRS, and that increase in the budget was done to increase their technology. Their computers were really, really old. And to replace employees who had resigned and to improve customer service. Because right now, if you call the IRS, you can be on hold for hours. So that's what the money was for. But Fox, or specifically Brian Kilmeade, said, no, this is to hire IRS agents who are going to harass you middle-class people. No, it wasn't. Now, there was, like I said, they were hiring some new people. These were people who had resigned. But And the whole thing about, they carry firearms. Well, there's a small number of IRS agents who are actually authorized to carry firearms. They're the ones who deal with serious criminal activities such as money laundering, drug trafficking, and organized crime. But the IRS agent who is looking at your taxes does not carry a gun. The IRS agent who would be supervising your audit does not have a gun. By and large, IRS agents don't have guns. There's a very small number of exceptions to that. And an independent study showed that this new funding, which Donald Trump is going to turn down, he just froze the budget of the IRS, could lead to as much as $850 billion in new revenue over the next decade by finding tax cheats among the billionaire class and the multi-hundred millionaire class. So here's Trump making the deficit worse, reducing the funds available for critical services like, policing the border or healthcare or law enforcement or preventing terrorism or aiding poor families or children or education or repairing our crumbling infrastructure. Yeah, let's just leave $850 billion, $850,000 million on the table or in the money bins of the billionaires because they finance his political campaigns, don't you know? Yeah. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is traveling, digitally to Germany to tell the neo-Nazis that, hey, it's time to stop worrying about the Holocaust. Let's talk about that after the break here on Holocaust Remembrance Day, the day that Auschwitz was liberated 80 years ago. It's 14 and a half minutes past the hour. I'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back. And welcome back. Cheryl in Los Angeles. Hey, Cheryl, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. There are so many things that are related. There's just so much going on. First of all, you were just talking about health care. And I'm in California, and I have been severely impacted by all the smoke from the fires.
Oh, my. I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope you're wearing masks or you've got an air filter for your house.
Yeah, I've got 2 small air purifiers going on in my bedroom right now, but it's like I wake up every morning and I can still smell the smoke.
Oh, yeah. We went through that for 3 days here in Portland when we had, just north of the city, the whole forest was on fire. And Louise and I couldn't breathe. I mean, and Amazon was completely sold out of air purifiers, and you couldn't find them in any local store. And it was just terrible. It was absolutely terrible. We were coughing for months. I'm so sorry you're experiencing that, Cheryl.
And like I said, I've had to cancel 2 doctor's appointments because I can't go outside because the air quality.
Yeah.
Is so toxic right now. And then we had heavy rain last night, and it's just, okay, the fires are one thing, okay, and getting back to health care.
Yeah.
I have Medicare and Medi-Cal. I'm 70 years old. I worked all my life, and I'm terrified right now because I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep any future doctor's appointments if Medicare is reduced or taken away, or the hospitals, my doctors stop taking it because they're not getting paid, but just a small fraction of what their services are worth.
Yeah. Well, the right-wing billionaires want to do away with these programs because they're paid for with tax dollars.
I know. And I want to thank you also. I was listening earlier. You were talking about AARP. And I keep getting, I have signed up for it in the past, but it's like, I don't see where it's really been a benefit to me.
Yeah, they'll give you some discount coupons for restaurants or something like that. But, basically what they want to do is sell you insurance. That's what AARP does.
Right, exactly. And, I have Medicare and Medi-Cal. Okay, I had signed up in the past for Medicare Advantage programs. But it's like the benefits are getting less and less. Yep. They promise you, like eye care and hearing and what's the other one?
Dental.
Dental, yeah. But it's not really worth it. you know?
Yeah. No, typically what they do is they offer the same kind of discounts that you can get if you just go into the vision specialist or the dentist and say, hey, do you have any discount programs? Most of them participate in coupon kind of programs, and you can get those discounts.
And one of the problems is like, sometimes, I've switched, different carriers, as far as the Medicare Advantage. And then I went back to just straight Medi-Medi.
Yeah, that's
and
a good
I was
idea.
advised to do that by my neurologist.
Yep.
But then there are certain doctors that don't take the Medi-Cal.
I know. Cheryl, I'm sorry I'm out of time, but I hope you can. I hope you make it through this, and I wish you the very best. I know it's going to be a tough time for everybody in Los Angeles. Thank you for the call. It's 18 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in just a minute. Stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back in 1968, when Lyndon Johnson was president, Earl Warren resigned from the Supreme Court. He was a liberal, even though he had been appointed by Eisenhower. Johnson wasn't able to replace him, in part because of Republican opposition in the Senate. And so when Nixon came in, he had this opening, but he wanted to have two openings. He wanted to get rid of Abe Fortas, who was the most liberal member of the court. So he had his Attorney General, John Mitchell, start an investigation into Abe Fortas's wife. Now, there was nothing there. There was no smoke at all. She had done absolutely nothing wrong, and history has proven that. But they were going to drag her before a grand jury and possibly before Congress and just, drag her through the mud. And this caused Abe Fortas to resign, and that gave Nixon two openings, and that's how the court turned to the right. I'm suggesting that Democrats should do the same thing with Justice Thomas. I've got an op-ed about it at Hartmann Report. You can read it over there. Check it out.
There's a game being played in the Capitol halls where billionaires tower and the common folk crawl. They cut through the safety nets we all depend to hand out tax breaks to their billionaire friends. They call it freedom, but the cost's obscene. Trading food for fortunes and hope for a dream. The people's voice grows quiet, the power shifts. Oligarchy rises on the back of their gifts.
Welcome back, 20 minutes past the hour. That's a hard no. He says... say more than a few Germans. Elon Musk gave a presentation to the far-right German party AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, or Alternative for Germany in English, saying that the party is the best hope for Germany and that you need to preserve German culture and protect the German people. In other words, to hell with these immigrants who just came into Germany after Russia bombed the crap out of Aleppo and Damascus. You had 5 million Syrian refugees. Remember that? 10, 15 years ago? Flee north into Europe. Germany took 1 million of them. Angela Merkel was quite proud of that. And on top of the several million Turkish Gastarbeiters is the German word, the guest workers, who were brought in after World War II because all the men were dead to rebuild the country. And now their great-grandchildren are starting to get citizenship, and AfD is pushing back on this like crazy. Basically, AfD's platform is, Germany for Germans, and by Germans they mean white people. This is happening, by the way, all over the world. We're living it right now here in the United States. Donald Trump coming out, this was his principal campaign platform, was, America for white people. And it's what he's doing actively right now. Let's get rid of all the brown people. Let's get rid of all the black people. Well, at least the black immigrants. And let's deny the rest of the black people, access to, basic stuff. The thing that actually made them crazy in Germany, though, was that Musk said that it's time to move on from past guilt. Today is the 80th anniversary of the day that Americans liberated Auschwitz in Poland. Trump built his death camps outside Germany so he could claim plausible deniability. Oh, that wasn't me, that was the Poles who did that. But it was him, of course. 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Not to mention the gypsies, the gays, the progressives, the liberals, they were called socialists back then, and the communists, who were all shipped off to the death camps or to labor camps. There were over 500 labor camps within Germany. Trump is now building labor camps here in the United States. 13th Amendment says that if you've been convicted of a crime, then you can be held as a slave. It literally says that. Slavery is still legal in the United States. And this is why you've got all this prison labor. This is why you have all these companies, these billion-dollar corporations that are running private prisons. Because, hey, they have slave labor. But Germany, this is going to be a tough one. I mean, here, Elon Musk controls the largest social media platform in the world, or at least the largest short-form social media platform in the world. And there's a lot of Germans on Twitter or on X. I speak German. I can, if I VPN in from Germany, you can get the whole German feed, right? And there is, and his algorithm appears to be favoring AfD in Germany the same way that it is favoring the Republicans here in the United States, at least from what little I've seen. Now, I may be wrong about that, and I'm, this is why I think that all of these social media companies should be required to publish their algorithms. They should be transparent about what they're doing. Because there's German elections coming. And AfD now has like a third of the population. I think it's 30%, 29% of the population. Big numbers. Like the rise of the right in Germany is huge. And it's mostly based on this race outrage. Just like the rise of the right in Italy. Meloni, the new right-wing prime minister, well, she's not all that new, but her principal campaign was, we've got to do something about all these brown people that came in during the crisis in Syria. Same thing in Sweden. I mean, it's happening all over Europe. And we're seeing it play out here in the United States. And people don't realize this is part of a whole. I mean, there's this whole concerted effort by white supremacists that are not limited to the United States, and by militia groups. I mean, this is literally happening across the white world, across the principally Europe. It's also, I mean, you're also seeing it in Russia as well, by the way. But Putin doesn't need to use that. He's just going after brown people in Russia. But this is the main thing driving the right now. And I really struggle to figure out a way to deal with this, to solve this. I mean, you can talk to people all day long about, hey, we're all just human beings here. We all bleed the same colored blood. We all think and feel the same way. You're not going to convince white supremacists of that. They really believe that they're the pinnacle of evolution. And that, this is our tribe and we want our country for our tribe. I don't know. If you have a solution, I'd love to hear it. 27 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where despair is not an option. I'll be right back with your calls. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs in the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice, I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time,
and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra.
Help support Progressive Radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it. Human beings have a couple of unique characteristics. The first is that we can be very tender and loving and concerned and caring toward people we perceive as being our group, us. We can also be extraordinarily violent against people that we consider to be them, if we think of them or this other as a threat. Probably the classic example of this is Adolf Hitler convincing Germans that, Jews were a threat to them and good Germans going along with the Holocaust. Well, this othering is built into our DNA. This is, ancient stuff. And the Republican Party, since the time of Nixon, when he started, picking up the white racist vote after Democrats laid it down in the 60s, the Republicans have been using this to try to other minorities in America as a political strategy. And this is really deadly stuff. There's a whole op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. Is othering human nature's deadliest instinct? Check it out. 35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Earl in Hyde Park, Illinois. Hey, Earl, what's on your mind today? Earl, watching us on Free Speech TV in Hyde Park, Illinois. Going once. Got everything set right over there? Going twice. Okay. JB in Greensburg, Kentucky. Hey, JB, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How you doing, Tom?
Great. I'm fine, JB. What's on your mind today?
Well, I tell you what, I watched that thing where Palace was on there and said that if those votes hadn't been canceled, she would have won.
That's right.
All right. So I guess we need to change our way of voting. How about voting through mail?
Well, it's not just that. I mean, there were millions of mail-in votes that were canceled also because the Republicans fielded a huge effort to put Republican people in where they were counting the votes to say that the signatures don't match. The way that you confirm that the ballot that came in through the mail is from the person who says it was, is that you have to put your signature on the envelope on the outside. And if that doesn't match the signature on file, it's biometrics, then your vote doesn't get counted. And millions of votes were challenged and not counted as a result of that too. I think the solution, JB, isn't any particular system of voting, because every single one of them can be gamed by Republicans. The solution is to say that we have a right to vote, just like we have a right to own guns in the United States. If the government wants to take away your gun, they have to go to a court and plead their case before a judge, who then issues a warrant saying that they can take away your gun. If they want to take away your vote, they don't even have to tell you. That needs to change. If we had a right to vote, then it would be a hell of a lot harder for them to challenge your vote. Make sense?
Well, I understand that the Republicans went down in the states and did that. Yeah. They marked out a bunch of people and stuff. Yeah. So I guess the Republicans are the only ones that can cheat like that.
Well, sadly, the Democrats, well, not sadly, Democrats want to, provide a good example, so Democrats refuse to do that. But yeah, you're right. JB, thanks for the call. Marlo in Santa Ana, Texas. Hey, Marlo, what's on your mind today?
Hi. We have a better grasp in my household of tariffs than Trump does, and we know just through 101 that it will cause that trade wars are no good to anybody. However, we don't really understand how tariffs work. I looked it up on Google, and it said the person at the import, once the product comes in, they slap the tariff on right there. Then apparently we pay it. But who collects the tariff? Who benefits from that?
I believe it's the Commerce Department. I used to pay tariffs. Back in the 1980s, myself and my best friend Jerry Schneiderman owned this little company called Langley St. Clair Instrumentation Systems, and we were importing computer parts from Taiwan and from South Korea, and also from Japan. And in fact, I flew over there and negotiated all these deals, and we had tariffs at that time. This was during the Reagan administration. And so the stuff would come in typically to Los Angeles, sometimes to San Francisco, and then our offices were in New York, and so it would get shipped, over ground to New York. But when it arrived at the port in Los Angeles, that was when you had to pay the tariff. And my recollection is that we were paying it might have been the IRS. Frankly, I can't say for sure, Maria, but or Marlo, excuse me. But it's one of the federal agencies that oversees this, and they collect the money. But we had to pay that. So if we had a shipment of picture tubes come in, because we were selling a lot of those back then, low radiation CRTs for the old Radio Shack computers, right. And say we had a shipment come in that was $10,000 worth of picture tubes, and the tariff was 10%. So we had to pay $1,000 in tariffs.
Right.
Then they wouldn't release the shipment until we had written the check, until our check had cleared. And then they would release the shipment from Los Angeles and put it on a truck, and UPS could bring it to us. So we we paid the tariff ourselves. That's how it works. And then, when we got the product, our product cost wasn't $10,000 for that load of picture tubes. It was $11,000 because it was $10,000 plus the $1,000 tariff. And that's
passed on to you and me, or passed on to me, for
That's
example.
exactly right, because we had to mark up, when we ultimately retailed these things through, we bought the back cover of Byte magazine for 2 years in a row. And when we retailed them, when we sold them through the mail, it was a mail order company, we had to mark it up to account for the tariffs. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay, we just didn't know where it went. And I said, well, where does Trump get this?
It goes into the Treasury.
How does he think it's going to benefit anybody?
Yeah, like I said, I can't remember who collected the money, but I know that where the money ends up is in the Treasury, in the United States Treasury.
Okay.
It is a tax, and that increases the money that the government has to do whatever the government wants to do. And Trump is talking about, replacing income taxes with tariffs. And in fact, from the founding, we didn't get an income tax until 1913. From the start of Lincoln had one for a short time during the Civil War, but that's kind of an anomaly and it went away. But from the founding of the Republic until the Civil War, 100% of the cost of the federal government was paid for by tariffs. We had, federal tariffs. We also had interstate tariffs.
I thought the income tax started with FDR. Huh.
No, the income tax started with Woodrow Wilson, would have been president in 1913. And all of, the salary of every single senator, congressperson, president, all the federal buildings, all that stuff was paid for with tariffs. And there were also interstate tariffs back then. Those went away after the Civil War. But individual states could have tariffs as well. And then from the Civil War till World War I, about 2/3 of the total cost of government was paid for with tariffs. And then World War I happened, just a few years after we got the income tax. And from World War I to World War II, about 1/3 of the cost of the federal government was paid for with tariffs. And then after World War II, we started radically cutting tariffs and, got them down to pretty much nothing by the middle 1980s, early 1990s. And that was when all the foreign goods just started flooding into the United States, because the tariffs had acted as a preventative, essentially. I mean, when we were selling through Langley St. Clair, when we were selling these CRTs back in the 80s, we also found a company down in Georgia, outside of Atlanta, that was also making them. They're making the same product we were importing from Asia, but they were a little more expensive because they were made in the United States with U.S. labor and all that kind of thing. But we ultimately just started buying from them exclusively after about a year and a half. because it was their shipping was more reliable, and it was, when we needed something, we got it very quickly. I mean, they were in Georgia, we were in New York City. So, but if you had, I mean, the logic of a tariff is like this. Let's say you've got, a product that can be made in China for $1,000, but if you make it, let's say it's an air conditioner or something like that, but if you make it in the United States, it's going to cost $2,000. Well, what you do is you put a $1,000 tariff on it so that it's $2,000 whether you buy it from China or whether you buy it from an American manufacturer. And what that does is it encourages stores to sell American goods, and it encourages Americans to buy American goods. And that's how we used to use tariffs up until the 1980s, really. But it was Reagan who really led this campaign. It was his administration that negotiated the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, also known as GATT. GATT created the World Trade Organization, the WTO. And it was the Reagan and Bush administration, mostly the George Herbert Walker Bush administration after Reagan, who negotiated the NAFTA deal, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which did away with all tariffs on goods sold between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And so when we got rid of all the tariffs, then suddenly if you could buy stuff from China that was cheaper, there was no reason not to. And that's why Walmart, when Walmart was started in the 1980s, under Sam Walton, their slogan was 100% made in the USA. They had big banners over the stores that said 100% made in the USA. In fact, Sam Walton's autobiography that he published in, I think, 1991 is titled Made in the USA. But by the mid-90s, Sam Walton was no longer running the company, and they were no longer selling Made in the USA stuff. And now, today, if you walk into a Walmart, you're hard-pressed to find anything made in the United States. I mean, everything is made overseas with cheap labor. And that's how the Walton
I can't
family...
wait to see what the shoppers are going to do after he slaps the tariff on China.
Yeah, it's going to be entertaining. It's going to be entertaining, Marla. Marla, thanks a lot for the call. I hope I was enlightening.
You elucidated a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the place where smart people get their news. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. John in Harlem, New York. Hey, John, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hi, Mr. Hartman.
Hey.
You know, you had said something last week that I was very interested in. You talked about critical thinking and how they're teaching critical thinking, I think, in Finland and that, in the schools and that. And I'm wondering what happened to us in critical thinking here in the United States where we need it the most. I tell you a little story, try and be brief. I was 14 years old, 1968. My junior high school was between Columbia University and City College, and this was during the Great Troubles, the war in Vietnam and the Civil Rights Movement. I graduated from junior high school at Riverside Church 2 years after Dr. King had been assassinated. And it died, And on 2 months after Dr. King's assassination, we went to Washington, D.C. on the day that our Senator Robert Kennedy died. And, we heard the funeral speeches in the Capitol, and the congressman at that time was Ryan. He made the speech on the steps of the Capitol. God, it was so hot that day. And then we went to the FBI because, I'm going to just be blunt about it, they want to make good niggers, spicks and chinks out of us at the FBI,
John,
the shooting and all the targets and stuff.
I get it, I get it, and you're entitled to use that word if you're black, I suppose, but I'd rather you didn't on my air.
Exactly. I know, but I'm just saying the way they treated us.
No,
I'm black,
I get it.
They treat us. But anyway, what happened was we went to, they told us to come down to the radio room. We're going to hear this before the press. And we heard them arrest James Earl Ray. I mean, live, reading his rights and putting the cuffs on him. And then this FBI man says, kids, this is your FBI work. Well, there were 50 of us. We were shocked. Our mouths were open. We said, you just happened to catch the killer of Dr. King when Robert Kennedy got it. And we started screaming, you're murderers. You, FBI, you're conspirators. Murderers, murderers. Whoa. And so the FBI man, he's jumping back. What's wrong with these kids? What's wrong with these kids? And one of our teachers was my social studies teacher, Mr. Levy, and he had seen action in the Battle of Columbia. A policeman had broken his arm. He stood between us and the FBI man, and he said, you know what? We pride ourselves in teaching our kids critical thinking, and I'm so proud I could bust. We said, Mr. Levy, let's get out of here. This place is giving us the creeps.
What a great story,
And that's the first time I heard the words critical thinking used. The next year, we went on a field trip, 150 of us, guess where? To Washington, D.C. again. We said, oh, wow. And we were in the White House, and, they were showing us the presidential apartments. And one of the students whose two brothers were in Vietnam said, oh, I wish the president could come down so I could kick his, I won't say, what she said. And so we started screaming, Nixon, come down, 150 of us strong. and the Secret Servicemen surrounded us and said, all right, all you kids out of here. I think we were the only school in the history of this country that were thrown out of the White House. And as we were leaving, this one lady that started the controversy, she touched one of the columns we were leaning against as we were leaving, and she said to one of the Secret Servicemen, because I touched the column, said, oh, it's, soot on your hand. She grabbed my hand. She said, you know what I like to do to the White House? I light up paint it black. Now, that was 1969. We got a black president, but we still don't have critical thinking being taught in the schools. And with our citizens learning critical thinking, maybe they would make better decisions than this horrible election we went through.
You're absolutely right,
What do you say about critical thinking?
I think that was a wonderful story. And, yeah, we need to be teaching critical thinking in our schools. We absolutely do. John, thank you so much. That was great. 49 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Welcome back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. Jonathan in Portland. Hey, Jonathan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. So I want to pick up with your theme of healthcare. And there was a caller earlier who was fixated on murder rates. I think the more important metric to look at is life expectancy, and probably one of the best sources of information is in The Lancet. It was a study published in December called The 10 Americas, and it looked at various geographic areas and made connections with economic and educational disparities. And what it found is that over a 20-year period, starting from about 2000, life expectancy has been plummeting in America. So at about the year 2000, the range in life expectancy from various groups was about 12 years. And that was if you were a poor black in the South versus a white Asian. It plummeted to 13.9 to 15.8 to 18.9 in 2020, and in 2021, the largest recorded gap in life expectancy now is over 20 years, 20.4 years. And who is that between? Well, big surprise, it's between Asian Americans and Native Americans. And the Native Americans have a life expectancy of just over 62 years. As opposed to 83 years, right, for someone who's Asian. So you can see in America, the thing we need to be looking at is not whether or not the murder rate's going up and down. Of course, it's been going down. But it's this tremendous disparity in life expectancy. And just to address single-payer health care, single-payer health care is important to save money, but there's something even more important. Single-payer health care serves the function of national security, because countries that had single-payer health care survived the pandemic much better than America. And that's when we saw the largest disparity in life expectancy was during the COVID pandemic, and particularly among blacks.
Yeah. By and large, because they were working in jobs that were public interface.
There's a whole variety of reasons, but this particular study, again, it makes correlations. See, the interesting thing about it is there were always disparities in life expectancy, but they didn't necessarily correlate with education or with economic advantages necessarily. But in this particular study, they show that they're correlating even more and more.
Yeah.
And I just might touch on, the liberation of Auschwitz for a moment, because, I think people have this idea that, it was like the Stalinist Russians came and liberated the camp, and everyone left like, the movie was over and they went home and, had dinner. And it wasn't like that. They lived in the camps for months and months. There were death marches prior to the liberation because the Nazis wanted to erase the evidence of the camp. So there were tens of thousands of people that were marched and died.
Yep.
It was a mess, and it wasn't as simple as just flipping a switch and liberating the camp.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jonathan. And that history is one that one hopes Germany does not forget, and that we don't replicate. Jonathan, thank you for the call. MJ in Seattle. Hey, MJ, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, just fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. I am calling because I have a dear relative who is under the rainbow umbrella.
Yeah, me too.
And and we've talked about that. We've shared that before. And I got a little bit of information from them in a recent visit, where they're telling me that they are glad that they maybe a decade and a half ago they got their passport, because at that time they could check one of the gender boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And because now, if you have checked the X box or
right, the non-binary box,
that what is happening is that if they
they'll kick out your application.
Yeah, or grab all of your stuff, grab your birth certificate and all of your documentation, and then they own you. They can put you anywhere they want.
Wait a minute. Put you, what do you mean by that?
They are preparing to put people in camps.
You mean physically?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see any evidence of that being directed against gay people. Okay. What I see is that if you, that there's no longer a box that says non-binary, and so you have to pick male or female when you renew your passport.
If you have declared that you are non-binary, you could be on a wait list to be taken away. And
I don't think so, MJ.
Really?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we reached that point, but if we were anything close to that right now, there are some really great organizations out there, Lambda Legal Defense Fund, the Human Rights Campaign, who would be all over this.
There's one in the South, isn't there? Was
the big group in the South is which is based out of Louisiana, I believe, is the Southern Poverty Law Center.
That's one.
I subscribe to their stuff. They're not talking about this. I support them financially.
If you want to help somebody save their ability to leave the country, I guess maybe now the new forms don't have an X.
Yeah, that's the big change. At least that's my understanding. MJ, I got to run. I'm sorry, but thank you for the call. There is really major cause for concern, but being hauled away and put in a camp right now for gay people is not yet one of those concerns. MJ, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you, and stay safe.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, We also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to